One of the most urgent tasks for our country is to decisively defeat the climate hysteria hoax.
We are in the beginning of a mass extinction.
The ability of CO2 to do the heavy work of creating a climate catastrophe is almost nil at this point.
The price of oil has been artificially elevated to the point of insanity.
That's not how you power a modern industrial system.
The ultimate goal of this renewable energy, plan is to reach the exact same point that we're at now.
You know who's tried that? Germany. 7 straight days of no wind for Germany. Their factories are shutting down.
They really do act like weather didn't happen prior to 1910.
Today is Friday.
That's right, Greta. It is Friday, and it is the best day of the week. And it's not just because the Memorial Day weekend is almost here, because it is the day that the Heartland Institute broadcasts this here Climate Realism Show. My name is Jim Lakely. I'm the vice president of the Heartland Institute. We are an organization that has been around for 40 years, and we have been known for most of that time as the leading global think tank pushing back on climate alarmism. And Heartland and this show bring you the data, the science, the truth, and when we're fortunate enough, some excellent guests to counter the climate alarmist narrative you've been fed every single day of your life. There is nothing else quite like the Climate Realism Show streaming anywhere. So I hope you will bring friends to view this live stream every Friday at 1 p.m. Eastern Time. And also like, share, and subscribe, and leave your comments underneath this video. These all convince YouTube's algorithm to smile upon this program, and that way it gets in front of even more people. And as a reminder, because big tech and the legacy media do not really approve of the way we cover climate and energy on this program, Heartland's YouTube channel has been demonetized. I say this every week, and it probably will not help us get remonetized, but there it is. So if you want to support this program, please visit heartland.org/TCRS. That's heartland.org/TCRS. That stands for the Climate Realism Show. And you can help make sure that we bring this show to you every single week. Any support that you could give us is warmly welcome and greatly appreciated. And we also want to thank our streaming partners, as always, junkscience.com, CFACT, What's Up With That, the CO2 Coalition, and our friends over at the Heartland UK Europe. So welcome to you all, and I hope you will follow these accounts on X and become a subscriber to this show on YouTube and Rumble. That really also helps us out, and it's very free to do. We have a very information-packed show and a lot of fun today, so let's get started. We have with us, as usual, Anthony Watts. He's the senior fellow at the Heartland Institute and publisher of the most influential climate website in the world. What's Up With That? We have Sterling Burnett, the Archbishop of Canterbury, but his professional title is the director of the Arthur B. Robinson Center on Climate and Environmental Policy at the Heartland Institute. And of course, Linnea Lueken, research fellow for energy environment policy at Heartland. And we are so happy to welcome back to the show once again our friend Steve Milloy. He is the publisher of junkscience.com. He's the author of Scare Pollution, Why and How to Fix the EPA. He's a senior policy fellow at the Energy and Environment Legal Institute and a member of the board of directors at the Heartland Institute. Welcome, Steve, and welcome all.
The Archbishop is back, baby.
After a week of a break from you, here you are.
2 weeks. 2 weeks.
2 weeks. Goodness gracious. All right. Well, like I said, we have a really information and fun-packed show for you today, and I thank you all for being here. And before, we always start off our show with what we call the crazy climate news of the week, but we had breaking news that we have to get to first, and it's pretty awesome breaking news. And it's news about Michael Mann and his baseless defamation suit that has dragged on for more than a decade in the swamp of the DC courts. And he got some more bad news just this week. So on Thursday afternoon, Judge Alfred Irving of the DC Superior Court ordered, and this is from Mark Stein's website, by the way, ordered vexatious litigant Michael E. Mann to pay Mark's co-defendants, the Competitive Enterprise Institute and Rand Simberg, $47,350.80 in attorney's fees, and he must pay that within 30 days. This comes on top of a few weeks ago that the judge ordered Michael Mann to pay about $530,000 in attorney fees to National Review, plus another $56,000 to the Competitive Enterprise Institute for court costs, and then another $9,600 to CEI for discovery costs in 2020. And the total now, after engaging in this sort of vicious, frivolous litigation to financially ruin and harass some very brave truth tellers on the climate, he now finds himself, at least on paper, $1 million lighter. Anthony Watts, try not to do too much dancing over there in your chair.
Yeah, well, it couldn't happen to a nicer guy. He really deserves this, because it was his whole effort was it was mendacious litigation, and it had no basis in claims, and it was just his giant ego basically not being able to accept the fact that some people don't like him and make fun of him. And he couldn't handle that. And now he's getting slapped down by the court. And I'm sure his ego is taking quite a bruising today. But here's the thing. I don't think he's going to pay a dime. Not just because he doesn't want to or won't, because he didn't pay Tim Ball when Tim Ball won that lawsuit. No, it's because probably the Climate Science Legal Defense Fund, which is a bunch of eco-whiners that have gotten together to fund this kind of stuff, basically will probably pay for it. And my man will get off scot-free, as he usually does. Such a weasel.
It's interesting. He's already ignored one court order to pay up in Canada. All he has to do is avoid going to Canada, and he may never pay that. But now he's calling. I saw a story just before I came on where he's calling for UPenn students to form militias if Trump doesn't obey court orders. Maybe MAGA students should form militias and storm the UPenn campus if he doesn't follow court orders.
Disavow.
100%.
Disavow. He doesn't even like to be looked at in grocery stores. So, he's a pretty sensitive guy. I have a feeling.
This litigation started out with Michael Mann filing a complaint claiming that he was a Nobel Prize winner. Yeah. And that was false. And it has not improved since then. His attorneys lied about his damages. They presented false testimony and were sanctioned by the court for doing that. Now he owes more than $1 million in attorney's fees. Anthony's right. He'll never pay, and no one's expecting that he will. But his ship has really taken on water. And now, yesterday I went on his Blue Sky account to see if he was going to say anything about this, and I found that he's now sort of kind of threatening the life of the president with the Second Amendment. There's a tweet of his, or a post of his on my X account where he says it's time to use the Second Amendment against the president. So I don't know. Maybe the FBI needs to visit him as well as Jim Comey.
I think maybe we should all place a call.
I think it would be Secret Service that looks into him, not the FBI.
Whoever.
But he's awful. But you say his ship is taking on water. Every step along the way, he keeps getting rewarded. I mean, just late last year.
He's going to take them down too, Sterling. He's a National Academy of Sciences member. He's at University of Pennsylvania. Do they really want their faculty threatening the life of the president of the United States? I don't think so. I mean,
I'd hope you're right, but all I know is,
is Penn willing to give up all?
He was given an administrative position after all this, happened before the tweet. But
yeah, I know. But is the University of Pennsylvania willing to give up all their foreign students for Michael Mann? I don't know. Wait till the president finds out.
Yeah. All right.
Yeah. There's this new hockey stick, by the way.
That's right. On the screen is now the real hockey stick, which is the legal cost for Michael Mann.
That's the Ozempic?
Yeah.
Is that the Ozempic?
Unprecedented.
The Ozempic Michael Mann. Yeah.
Would you ask Steve?
Is that the Ozempic Michael Mann?
Yeah. That's the AI Ozempic.
Yeah. Michael Mann, sometimes you can't make AI image generation make people fat, no matter how hard you try. But he has actually slimmed down over the last decade, I believe.
That's why I asked.
Yeah. Well, hopefully his wallet's going to get a little slimmer, or at least the wallets of those dark money donors who have been funding this BS lawsuits just for people who criticized him and told him that his science was not sound. And Judy Curry, who was on the show just a couple of weeks ago, you can find her on X. She is dancing a little bit of a digital jig over this. I try to be kind. I try to be a kind of good person, but it's very, very difficult to give Michael Mann any grace in this, considering how poorly he has treated forever anybody who criticizes him. So,
well, just to answer Sterling's question about his ship taking on water. I mean, he's completely withdrawn. I mean, he's even been forced off X. Now he's on Blue Sky. He really doesn't engage on climate all that much. He's definitely on a downward trajectory on this.
If I want to correct you on one thing, he wasn't forced off of X.
Well, yeah,
he left X voluntarily because the evil Elon owns it. And so on January 20th, the day of Trump's inauguration, he went over to Blue Sky and told everybody on X to follow him over there. And you're right, though, he has kind of sequestered himself because over on Blue Sky, it's nothing but liberal, 24/7, 365. And so he's got a safe space to rant and so forth, and no one's going to challenge him, because nobody in their right mind who's a positive, logical thinker is going to go over to Blue Sky and get an account.
Right.
The saddest thing of all this is, as Jim said at the outset, more than a decade of court time was taken up with this nonsense. They could have been dealing with real cases. The courts, from the outset, should have said, we have something called the First Amendment here in this country. This doesn't get through the courtroom door. People mocking you doesn't merit sanction.
I love what Chris March just wrote. If you have a Blue Sky account in your bio, I just assume you're a few French fries short of a Happy Meal.
Well, 100%. All right. Well, that's enough spending time on that piece of that piece of work that is Michael Mann. I just want to, I don't want him to sue me too. So here we go. Let's start with the regular part of the show that we start this thing with, is the crazy climate news of the week. Hit it, Andy. All right. Thank you very much, Bill Nye. Our first item today is New Zealand dumping net zero. This is a story from The Telegraph. New Zealand abandons Jacinda Ardern's net zero push. Now, this news isn't crazy. It's just crazy good news. New Zealand has abandoned its pursuit of net zero by revoking a ban on drilling for oil and gas. The country's government confirmed the shift in its latest budget this week, which unveiled plans to invest $200 million in New Zealand money into new offshore gas fields. The reversal marks an end to a policy announced by Jacinda Ardern, the former prime minister and WEF acolyte, in 2018. She claimed at the time that, quote, the world has moved on from fossil fuels, unquote. Well, I guess not. Her attempted ban has since been replicated in Britain by Ed Miliband, the climate secretary, who has halted all new North Sea drilling after Labour triumphed in last year's election. However, Nicola Willis, New Zealand's finance minister, has consigned Ms. Ardern's policy to history by announcing plans to expand offshore gas fields. It comes after New Zealand's planned shift to renewables has backfired, generating higher prices and raising the risk of blackouts. Shane Jones, the country's resources minister, said Ms. Ardern's ban has been a disaster. The decision to reverse the ban followed 3 years of rising energy prices that left 110,000 households unable to warm their homes, according to Consumer NZ, a nonprofit advocate. Transpower, the equivalent of the UK's national grid, also previously warned that the nation was at high risk of blackouts because renewables were not producing enough power during cold spells. That's enough that I'll read from that story. I know we have some Kiwis who watch this show every single week, so congratulations to you on hitting your country in the face with reality and getting the people in power to put your well-being over their worship of climate deities. So, Steve, I want to start with you. You've got to be happy to hear this news, and the UK has got to be next, right? Just reality is just undefeated.
So this has been in the works for a while. It's one of the reasons, Jacinda lost her job to start with. And so they finally got around to doing it. I'm waiting for the UK to come to its senses. The Conservative Party is certainly moving that way. Today in the Telegraph, there's a piece from Jordan Peterson where he says, climate is a mental illness. Just generally speaking, around the world, the climate hoax is melting. I can't think of anywhere where it's advancing. In Europe, they're either getting rid of the EV mandate or moving it back. We had that disaster in Spain with the solar. I mean, just nothing good is happening. I mean, Ed Miliband is kind of holding the line, but I wonder how long he can do that. But just generally speaking, climate is in full meltdown. We might have to change topics on this show.
I think what happened in Spain and Portugal is no small influence on what's going on in Europe. We didn't mention it, but Germany's moving faster than England to reverse its net zero, its climate stuff. They recently agreed with France to count nuclear as renewable and clean energy that counts towards their climate goals. Germany, which closed all of its nuclear plants after Fukushima because they had so many nuclear plants on the shore that were facing tsunamis. They closed all those nuclear plants. Now it's not clear if they're going to open any of theirs in their own country, but they're willing to let other Europeans and support other Europeans opening nuclear and counting it as renewable. So there's a lot of backsliding to go on.
Yeah.
Yep. All right. Well, congratulations to you in New Zealand and around the world. And yeah, I think this is something that's going to spread.
Good news for the sheep.
Yes, good news for the sheep. Look, if this show has to go out of business, I don't think it's going to happen. Climate alarmism is with us, I think, permanently. But
that was a joke.
I know it was a joke, but hey, we're going to report on the good climate realism news as well. So we could
just roll with it and call it the Environmental Realism Show.
I don't know anything else but climate anymore. So
that's right. All right. Well, let's get on to our second item, which I've titled "Very Vivacious Volcanoes," and this comes from Anthony Watts from his website. What's up with that? Volcanoes spew 3 times more CO2 than thought, and 19,000 new undersea volcanoes found. Is human-driven climate narrative crumbling? So I'll just read this from it a little bit for you. Folks, hold on to your hats. 2 groundbreaking studies dropped this past month, and they're shaking up everything we thought we knew about carbon dioxide in the Earth's atmosphere. The first, from the University of Manchester, reveals that volcanic CO2 emissions could be 3 times higher than previously estimated. The second, from the School of Ocean and Earth Science and Technology, uncovers a staggering 19,325 previously unknown undersea volcanoes. Together, these findings throw a massive wrench into the narrative that human activity is the sole driver of rising atmospheric CO2. Let's dive in. Manchester's volcanic CO2 bombshell might be a game changer. Published in Science Advances, their findings are a wake-up call. Traditional monitoring focused on hot volcanic vents that spew easily detectable gases like sulfur dioxide, but cooler, water-rich hydrothermal systems absorb acidic gases, masking significant CO2 output. The new tech revealed that Soufriere Hills emits 3 times more CO2 than earlier estimates had suggested. Now, Anthony, you wrote this. I don't want to read the whole thing, but maybe you could take it from here and explain this earth-shattering news.
Well, the thing that's going on here is this is one data point. Now, even though we've got all these other 19,000 plus volcanoes, this is a new way that they measured CO2 from this one volcano. And the fact that it came out 3 times more than they expected suggests that the way that we've been measuring CO2 coming out of volcanoes in the past, for the past 100 years or whatever, has not been accurate and doesn't really show the total amount. And that seems to be the case here. because they've got a new monitoring system that seems to be catching much more than what other systems did previously. So if you combine that with the fact that we got all these 19,000 plus undersea volcanoes that they never knew about, and that we have likely an excess of carbon dioxide coming up out of the ocean that is not accounted for. And so we get the arguments against this from people that have seen this have been saying, oh, well, it doesn't matter. It's a drop in the bucket in the scheme of things. But we don't know that for sure. That's the problem with climate science. It has this, and Michael Mann is a perfect example. They have this dead-on certainty that they are right, and nobody should question it. And that's the problem with climate science. And it's basically, as Richard Lindzen said, the way that people have been acting about their damn the torpedoes certainty, full speed ahead on fixing the climate, is that they just have polluted the science so badly with this certainty and with this activism that people have lost trust in it. And, that's why it's going downhill. That, all these different things are being yanked out based on what has been claimed we have to do right now. We're looking at NOAA getting paired out. We're getting EPA stripped of power and employees and so forth. And, I was just thinking about it a little bit ago, about how much winning we've had in the climate front since Trump took office. And, it's kind of like we had the Chinese year of the rat or the dog or the whatever. I think we have the year of the winning going on right here.
Steve Milloy, Donald Trump said there'd be so much winning, we'd be tired of winning. Are you tired of winning yet?
No, not at all. So I don't know if you guys covered this a few weeks ago. NOAA came out and reported that CO2 increased by a record. Atmospheric CO2 increased by a record last year, 3.75 ppm. But if you do the math, you find out that energy emissions really only account for about half of that. Now, we have close, dear friends on our side who insist that, although they're climate skeptics, they insist that all CO2 since, pre-industrial era is from fossil fuels. And that's clearly not the case. And so people need to be open to, the expanded carbon cycle, more from volcanoes. We really don't understand anything. And the way we know we don't understand anything about climate is because nobody can predict anything. Nobody has ever predicted anything, and nobody is likely to predict anything in the future. And that means we don't really know anything. I know everyone's got their physics and their, watts per square meter and all that kind of crap, but it never really works out to a correct prediction.
The IPCC has, across the course of its history, put out charts and talked about climate change. And, CO2 is the hammer. And because they have a hammer, every climate change looks like a nail. They say, what are the factors that influence climate change? And they have clouds. And they say, well, that's poorly understood. And they have volcanoes. And they say, oh, that's poorly understood. Ocean currents, poorly understood. All these factors that we know impact climate change are poorly understood, but they're confident that the only thing they really understand, CO2, is driving climate change. And all of that's from humans. Yet, as this article shows, is 3 times more emissions are coming from volcanoes than previously accounted for. I have things, articles in Climate Change Weekly all the time saying, this is something the models miss. This is something the models miss. And even in the article that Anthony posted, there was another thing going on. It talked about all the undersea volcanoes they've discovered. Now, I'm not saying they're putting out CO2 into the atmosphere, but what they do is affect their ocean currents, which aren't accounted for in the climate model. So once again, the climate models are inadequate. They fail to make predictions. Their assumptions are bad. And yet we are told humans are primarily responsible for current climate change, and it's catastrophic when we don't even understand the physics of climate change.
Yeah, that's that damn the torpedoes, full speed ahead certainty that they have going on, which has been proven to be wrong, and we really all need to take a step back and look at the science again, because they rushed this to a conclusion before the science was really in. And they keep saying the science is settled. Well, no, it wasn't. It never will be. And that's the problem. They think it is settled and we're right and you're wrong. And it's become a tribal sort of a thing, with the climate advocates versus, climate realists like us.
Yeah. And it's really made them kind of stupid. I've been reading about how, Europe has had a warm spring. And then today there's an article how, solar power in Germany is going gangbusters. Well, I mean, could they put, 2 and 2 together? It's the sun, right? I mean, that's why solar power is going gangbusters, because the skies are clear, more sunshine is hitting the earth. Duh. It's probably got a warming effect too.
Yep.
Yeah, I mean, just talk about the winning. We'll get on to our next topic, but it's only been, has it even been 200 days? Obviously not. Maybe 120 days of the second Trump presidency, and we're going to be going over the big beautiful bill and some of the climate spending that's been canceled, maybe some climate spending that has been retained. But what I think is wonderful news is that bad politicized science is no longer, I would hope, no longer going to be subsidized by you and me and our tax dollars, because if you cut off the funding for bad science, you will stop getting bad science. And the federal government's been funding a lot of that over the years. All right, let's move on to our third item here. And it's, I guess, some bad news that from the BBC. Apparently, net zero is not going to save our coastlines after all. This is from the BBC, as I mentioned. Headline, coastlines in danger, even if climate target met, scientists warn. So I guess we should just forget about it then, right? But no, here we go. The world could see hugely damaging sea level rise of several meters or more over the coming centuries. What a prediction that is. Even if the ambitious target of limiting global warming to 1.5 C is met, scientists have warned. Nearly 200 countries have pledged to try to keep the planet's warming to 1.5 degrees Celsius, but the researchers warn that this should not be considered safe for coastal populations. They drew their conclusion after reviewing the most recent studies of how the ice sheets are changing and how they have changed in the past. But the scientists stressed that every fraction of a degree of warming that could be avoided would still greatly limit the risks. Wow. The world's current trajectory puts the planet on course for nearly 3 degrees Celsius warming by the end of the century, compared with the late 1800s, before humans began burning large amounts of planet-heating fossil fuels. But even keeping to 1.5 C would still lead to continued melting of Greenland and Antarctica, as temperature changes can take centuries to have their full impact on such large masses of ice, the researchers say. Quote, our key message is that limiting warming to 1.5 degrees Celsius would be a major achievement. It should absolutely be our target, but in no sense will it slow or stop sea level rise and melting ice sheets, said the lead author of the paper, Professor Chris Stokes, a glaciologist at Durham University. So Sterling, there's a ton to unpack in this one, especially how our climate minders adhere to the adage that the beatings will apparently continue until morale improves. But didn't we just hear some good news about the ice in Greenland and Antarctica recently anyway?
In Antarctica, they say that more ice was added. New studies confirm what NASA said back in 2015, which more ice is being added than being lost. So it's actually reducing sea level rise. I don't know about the Greenland study you're talking about, but to unpack in this is, as far as I know, we've been above 1.5 degrees for a year and a half now. So that target is gone. It is no more. We failed to cap it at 1.5 degrees. That's not me measuring it. That is all these societies that measure temperatures around the globe have said hottest year, centuries, hottest year ever, above 1.5 degrees, sustained for 18 months. Yet these guys, their paper essentially says 1.5 is a futile goal. It won't stop sea level rise, but we should do it anyway at great cost. Otherwise, coastal flooding will occur, but coastal flooding will always occur. and seas have risen 400 feet more than since the last ice age. And if history of interglacials is any guide, sea levels will continue to rise until the next glacial cycle comes. If anything, so-called human-caused climate change may be delaying that interglacial cycle. I don't know if that's true. I mean, but
if you don't know?
Yeah, if we prevent ice caps from growing, that would be a good thing.
Yeah, I mean, this isn't new, right? This study that came out, we've always known, or at least as long as I've been following this issue, we've known that sea level rise is going to lag the temperature change potentially, because of the ice melt. It's not like a direct, the way that people think about this issue is like, oh, it's warm, so we're going to get ice melt, and it's very immediate. But that's not the way that most of the glaciologists understand it. And I don't quite understand what the mechanics are, but they've been saying for years that it doesn't matter, with regards to sea level rise, it doesn't matter if we halt warming or emissions or whatever, it's going to continue to rise regardless. And a large part of that is because it is obvious that at least, even to alarmists, that at least a portion of warming is natural. And so, as Sterling said, sea level rise has already been occurring for thousands of years. It will continue to occur for thousands of more years unless we all of a sudden dip back into an ice age. It is important for coastal areas to be aware of sea level rise, even though it's very slow. Like, they talk about acceleration and stuff, and when they say acceleration, it's on the scale of like millimeters per decade, so it's really not all that alarming. The larger factors in local sea level rise, local relative sea level rise, are not going to be driven by, or the threats are not going to be driven by ice-related sea level rise. It's going to be more pushed by thermal expansion, and especially like land sinking as you remove water from aquifers and things like that, and natural erosion, because the ocean and the coastlines are super dynamic systems. So people do need to be aware that that kind of is an issue if you live in a coastal area. And as we've seen with a lot of the like billion-dollar disaster claims and stuff, you have an increase in flooding in any area that you pave over a bunch of land with concrete, right? Because there's nowhere for the water to soak in. So yeah, it's going to flood your streets. So it's very frustrating to always have the media like cage this as simultaneously something we need to be doing something about at the like global scale, while also kind of downplaying the importance of like local infrastructure improvement. I don't know. That's my little rant. They do have articles that they'll run talking about how they need to put like sea gates in, and they need to put walls in New York and stuff. But they always attribute it to climate change. They never talk about like water withdrawal and land sinkage and stuff. So I don't know. It's stupid.
Subsidence and compaction. Look, in Houston, it's not on the sea. We have a ship channel that we've expanded, but it's not on the sea. It is a swamp. It was a huge malarial wetland before we started developing it. And you know what? When you put heavy things on swampy mud, they start to sink.
Incredible.
It's called compaction. Yeah. And that's happening in a lot of places where they're building in wetlands along the coast.
Yeah. So, my favorite sea level sort of debunking, the hoaxers do it to themselves, because they'll say that the last time atmospheric CO2 was this high, sea level was 20 feet higher. Okay. Where is it? It's not there. It's not happening. Obviously, CO2's got nothing to do with it, or at least it had nothing to do with that. Linnea mentioned there's a lot of coastal subsidence going on. And, Anthony may call me a flat earther, but I'm still not convinced that you can estimate sea level rise with satellites. I just have a hard time believing that with all the motion in the water and, the variations in the satellite orbit. I just don't buy it.
You damn flat earther.
I just don't buy it. I'm sorry.
No, that's why we look at tide gauges, which are,
Satellites measure this with this much precision. No, thank you.
Yeah. I can't believe nobody on this panel was triggered by the idea that they were making predictions that they think will have any value whatsoever, not just 100 years from now, but hundreds of years in the future. Well, they're able to do this.
I'm still trying to get over what you characterized like an expanding pole as good, or more ice is good. Who cares? How do you know that? How do you know that more ice is good or less ice is good? There was an article I saw this week, something about glacial recovery will take centuries. I mean, it does not keep me up at night. How much ice there is at the poles. Sorry, or at any glacier. It's all crazy. Who thinks about this stuff?
Yep.
One benefit of more ice, and there aren't many, is that there's more ice for a drink to chink around in my my highball glass.
I get that out of my refrigerator, though. No.
Well, yeah, but I like natural ice. I prefer a glacier outside my door, so I can just go chip it off.
Yep. All right. Let's move on. We still have a lot to get to today, so but thanks for that. This is maybe we don't have to spend too much time on this, but I thought it was worth mentioning because this has been those of us who speak to each other about climate issues throughout the week. This was kicking around as a topic to talk about. And I title it, Did Trump Get Swindled? This is a story from E&E News. And this actually relates to the big, beautiful bill that just passed. Or it says, E&E News, Trump spared a New York wind project. What did he get in return? So the day after a big offshore wind project returned from the dead, all anyone in New York wanted to talk about was gas. President Trump's sudden decision Monday to reverse course and lift a stop work order on Empire Wind 1 prompted widespread speculation in Albany and Washington that the president had extracted a commitment from New York Governor Kathy Hochul to allow a new gas pipeline to move forward. Basically, that's not been allowed in New York for more than a decade. The governor, a Democrat, insisted no such deal like that was made. Even her aides noted Hochul was not opposed to a new pipeline, provided it meet all the necessary permitting requirements. Those statements did little to temper speculation among both supporters and detractors of offshore wind. At the state capitol in Albany, State Senator Pat Fahey, a Democrat who has championed wind, said he was thrilled to learn on Monday that work on the Empire Wind was resuming. But after hearing the news, her thoughts quickly went to gas. Interior Secretary Doug Burgum issued a stop work order for Empire Wind on April 16th to the cheers of Republican lawmakers, conservative activists, and offshore wind critics who said the project would mar the ocean and drive up electric bills. In a post on X, the conservative activist and wind critic Steve Milloy wrote that he, quote, didn't understand the decision to lift the pause, noting that the pipeline through New York is, quote, nowhere close to even being completed or surviving litigation. If there's more to this deal, let's hear it. So Steve, the reporter, I don't know if he called you or anything, but he did quote your tweet in his story. So have you figured out what's going on here?
No. We were all very excited when that wind farm was paused, because then they, said they were just going to quit. And then all of a sudden we get this. And, the thing is that every time Trump talks about windmills, he craps on them. And he says the nastiest things about them. And he'll just go off on a minute rant anytime someone brings them up. And so Empire Wind had been shut down, and then all of a sudden comes back from the dead in exchange for, these pipelines, which, they're nowhere close to being approved. And even if they got approved, there would be litigation. He will not be, those pipelines will not be installed when he leaves office, if he ever leaves office. It was just so I don't know. Maybe he got something from Hochul on immigration or something, but it's not obvious why he reversed course.
I agree with Steve 100%. It's not just that they won't be built. It's not even clear to me that he even got commitments for pipelines. There are one, maybe two that he'd like to get built. A lot of people would like to get built. They've been stopped. I see no evidence that there is now progress moving forward. No new filings have happened since the withdrawal. It sounds like he must have gotten something, but vis-a-vis pipelines, a bag of magic beans is more likely.
Hey, but those paid off.
Yeah, people forget that the story they paid off.
Well, and maybe this will pay off too, but I don't think with pipelines. I don't think they'll grow any large pipelines.
Yeah. Well,
I mean, the trouble is that this is Trump's last term, right? So a lot of companies also, even if Trump's able to create like good conditions right now for them, a lot of companies are looking 3 years from now. Next, potential Democrat gets into office and is going to immediately shut it all down, right? It's not a good business investment at this point in time, unfortunately, unless they can get some kind of guarantee that the project will be able to go forward. It's what happened to Keystone. They were looking forward to having another Trump administration, but they canceled the project anyway because the investment environment was so poor for it. And the bureaucratic back and forth, it takes multiple years to get approvals through. And then you're back to square one because a new administration comes in and cancels everything. So it's a terrible environment for them to be in.
I'm not clear that even if you got the pipeline concession, it would have been a good deal. But certainly before the company started, commenced restarting the project, there should have been something solid, like not a commitment from the governor, but some kind of agreement signed between the federal government and the state government that the state government would not interfere with pipeline decisions by the federal government, interstate pipeline decisions by the federal government. It would back any claims, something in writing.
Well, I mean, look, if we didn't stop this offshore wind project, which one are we going to stop? Trump said he was going to stop them all. And it looks like he's going to stop none of them based on this. I mean, the guy can change his mind. He can be, really fickle that way. So who knows? But,
well, New Jersey stopped.
It's a head scratcher.
New Jersey and Maine are stopped.
Yeah, we got one off Virginia.
I think the real strategy, the easy strategy is just to make it so unattractive for investors, make it so uncertain that no one wants to get involved, make it really hard to get the subsidies, hard to get the permits. But, this is inexplicable.
Yeah. And then we're going to get into that here in the big, beautiful bill stuff, too, as far as what the incentives for clean energy, what they're going to look like at the moment. There's a long way to go for that thing. So, all right. Well, let's get to our meme of the week. I definitely wanted to show this. I came across this on X today. This is from our new energy secretary, Chris Wright. And he writes on May 22nd, "For too long, climate alarmism has infringed on American innovation and progress. This will no longer be the case. We are the administration of climate realism," in all caps, the realism part. So I don't know. Maybe he's a fan of the show. Where did he come across that term that we've been pushing out here for several years? That just made my week, man, when I saw that. That's great.
It would have been even better if he had a hot link to the Climate Realism page in our videos.
Well, that would be good. But here we have it on the screen, so it's saved for posterity for all eternity, or at least until they take our YouTube page down. All right. Let's get on to our main topic for today, and that is Trump's big, beautiful bill by a very the narrowest, I think, 215 to 214 vote in the House of Representatives on Thursday morning, I believe. The mega bill that Donald Trump calls his big, beautiful bill, that has his economic policies in there. It has his climate policies in there. It has his immigration policies in there. I really wish Washington, D.C. didn't actually always do this, where there's an enormous omnibus bill that has everything in it. But that's the Washington we live with today. So I'm going to just run over this a little bit, and then we'll take it to the panel here to identify and talk about some of the good and the bad in this thing. So the House approved it early Thursday morning after days of haggling between moderates and, quote, hardline conservatives on issues including renewable energy incentives. The legislation would now enact even steeper restrictions. This is from E&E News, by the way. Even steeper restrictions on Inflation Reduction Act tax incentives, including quicker phase downs of, quote, technology neutral production and investment credits. Nuclear energy, however, emerged as the big winner in the negotiations. Also, the updated text also scrapped GOP-friendly provisions, including language to sell or swap hundreds of thousands of acres in Utah and Nevada. Also gone is language on regulations, a mining road in Alaska, and drilling in the Arctic's National Petroleum Reserve. The sprawling legislation also includes provisions to accelerate National Environment Policy Act reviews and other permitting for companies willing to pay, new fees on electric vehicles and hybrids, cuts to climate grants and other spending, hooray, and expanded drilling and mining. And again, as I mentioned, this is just the beginning of the road. Speaker Mike Johnson yesterday said that he hopes to get it over and pass through the Senate and be signed by President Trump before the July 4th holiday. There are also apparently provisions making it easier to build new nuclear power plants in the U.S., which is a decades overdue, reform. So, Steve, let me start with you. You're usually glass half empty kind of guy.
Thank you.
The politics are the art of the doable. So, are you happy?
Yeah, I guess. I mean, look, the Inflation Reduction Act started out with about $1.2 trillion worth of spending. In 2024, Biden spent about $150 billion. So there's roughly, $1 trillion or so left. The draft of this thing at the beginning of the month, I did a grok analysis of it, left in, about 900 billion. So it really didn't cut out that much. This version that was passed by the House cuts out about half of the trillion. So there's still about 500 billion left in. And that is sort of a glass half full situation. The most important thing is that these tax cuts get passed. And if we can do that with getting rid of half of the, Green New Scam spending, that's okay with me. That's kind of a win. Maybe the Senate can do more. And also maybe the Trump administration in making it more difficult to get permits for wind, solar, and just making it more difficult to get these various subsidies could really take out a lot of the rest of the spending. So, it was a positive thing, and Republicans should vote for it, get it enacted, and let's move on.
It cut the EV tax credit, I believe. Won't be any more public money for chargers. That's a good thing. Unfortunately, they took out provisions that would allow the sale of some land in Nevada and Arizona to those states where the government owns an inordinate amount of real estate and real estate prices are higher. It cut a lot of spending or reduced the time over which spending could be done. That's to its credit. I'm a little concerned about the Senate, though. I saw today that 4 senators sent a letter particularly saying, we're not in agreement with all these green energy tax cuts. They're cutting way too deep, because their states are getting some of that green money that they voted against in the Inflation Reduction Act. So we'll see what comes out of the Senate. I'm a bit concerned. But there's a lot of things in the bill. I mean, the bill is not just environment and energy. There were some good things in other areas, like Steve said, the tax cuts being made permanent. So it's I'm not sure if it's a glass half empty or half full. I don't know where I come down on that, but there were provisions that I wish had stayed in there. They have done nothing, as far as I can tell, on the 45Q tax credits for carbon capture and storage. And at one time, the bill had a provision that where the federal government would override states' rights to block carbon capture pipelines. I don't know if that remained in the bill or was stripped. I haven't seen. I hope it was stripped, because states shouldn't be forced to accept these nonsensical, unjustified, not good for anything carbon capture pipelines or storage facilities.
Yep. I mean, ideally, what we, pie in the sky dream is that there's a one-page bill that says the Inflation Reduction Act is hereby repealed. And then that just gets done. And because the Inflation Reduction Act increased inflation, had nothing to do with inflation. And it was the Green New Deal in a, in a disguise. But, Steve, Anthony, there, I'll ask the panel. It's, again, the politics is the art of the possible. And you have a lot of egos and a lot of interests that you're trading to try to get what you can. I tend to agree with Steve that, half of the Green New Deal spending has been eliminated so far in the first round. And there's nothing to stop Donald Trump and Congress, a Republican Congress, maybe before the midterms or after the midterms, to just take on the rest of the spending and get rid of that at another time. I mean, I think getting rid of half of this in one fell swoop, I'm trying to look at that in a very positive way. How about you, Anthony?
Well, I think that doing things incrementally might be a little bit better than doing things all at once, mainly because when you do things all at once, while it may be, an effective strategy for some people, it also makes a lot of people really freaked out. And so the resistance level might be higher if you do it all at once. If you do it incrementally, you can kind of sneak things, maybe not sneak things through, but you can push things through that don't get so many people riled up because it's, one big thing. But in any event, I'm happy that we're seeing progress on this front.
Yeah, well, it's really frustrating because every Republican voted against this bill. And then Joe Biden or whoever was president last time was smart enough to dump all this money in red states. Yesterday on the front page of the New York Times, they had a map of the U.S. where all the money went. And the money went up to all these red states. And they have purchased all the red state politicians they needed to save at least, $500 billion worth of spending. And we saw how awful the spending is. I mean, Stacey Abrams getting $2 billion to buy appliances for people is crazy. And I just, I've got to hope that the Trump administration is going to use its administrative power to crack down on this spending. Who can afford this stuff? But the bill had to go through. There's no question about that. I mean, we're in a bad place. We've got people that are, susceptible to bribery and, it's bad.
Yeah. We're gonna get ready to go to Q&A here. I'll just add one more comment. I saw it today on X. There was a EPA Administrator Lee Zeldin was testifying, and the great John Kennedy, the senator from Louisiana, was questioning him, and he pointed out that I think it was $93 billion was shoveled out the door. So we thought it was $20 billion. It turns out $93 billion was shoveled out the door through EPA grants done between the election of 2024 and the inauguration of Donald Trump in January. And they're still trying to claw all that back. There's lawsuits now pending to stop us from clawing back what is obviously grift, graft, and payoffs and corruption at the highest level. So we will continue to keep an eye on that and cover that story. But, as Steve pointed out, there are things the administration can do administratively to stop some of this spending. And we hope they will do that, so that we can get climate realism as policy and not continually funding climate alarmism, which is what our government was doing. All right. You guys ready for some questions from the audience? I'm ready for some questions from the audience. Take it over. Take over the show here, Linnea.
All righty. You got it.
Your favorite
Handy
drop,
dandy
Linnea.
notebook time. Okay. So, all right. From C4ON, not sure if it's supposed to be representative of an A, but all right. So asks, isn't CO2 not important anymore anyway with the 99% saturation? Anthony?
Well, I don't know that it's at 99%, but it's near the top. Yeah, that's the thing. Most everybody in the climate alarmism industrial complex, let's call it, looks at the relationship of temperature and CO2 as being entirely linear. And if you try to explain it to them in terms of, well, no, it's logarithmic, and it gets less and less effective when it gets more saturated, they give you a blank stare like, what the heck are you talking about? And so, we're right. You're right. It's not all that important anymore. If we were back, 200 years ago and we were down to, 290 or 300 parts per million and it was cold and everything else, it would probably be a little more effective, but it's just not really all that much of a worry at this point. I'm not worried about it, and you shouldn't be either.
Yeah, we love carbon dioxide here on this show.
Right.
All righty. Thank you very much. Okay, from Chris Nisbet, which isotope of CO2 comes from the volcanoes? Same as from fossil fuels? Is there an isotope of carbon dioxide? I know there are carbon isotopes. I don't know if carbon dioxide has its own. I don't think that's how that works, but I could be wrong.
No, there are studies out there that look at the carbon isotope in carbon dioxide molecules, and there is a difference between what comes out of coal and so forth versus what comes out of saturation out of the ocean, or what comes out of us breathing it out. So there are some differences there, and they're using that difference to justify the idea that man is entirely responsible for, well, not entirely, but mostly responsible for all of the warming related to CO2. But again, it goes back to the saturation point thing. If it doesn't matter which isotope it is, or, it's all carbon dioxide. The carbon dioxide isotope of one type versus another doesn't really have any effect on the effective amount of back radiation that it produces when it's scattering photons and so forth in the atmosphere. So it's really not relevant to any real discussion of worry.
Alrighty.
You're muted, Sterling.
The isotope of carbon dioxide does not change its warming effect whatsoever.
Right.
What warming
So,
effect?
do we know what percentage is the carbon dioxide from volcanoes now with this new information? Did it actually adjust scientists' expectations as to like the contribution breakdown?
I don't think it has yet. I don't think anyone knows. They say it's 3 times higher than it was before, but as far as I can tell, even the IPCC didn't try to account for how much carbon dioxide is in the atmosphere from volcanoes. So it's 3 times more than it was, but nobody really knows, what percentage of that volcanoes made up the atmosphere. So who knows? Just that it's 3 times that now, whatever they thought it was, it's 3 times more.
I choose not to admit on this.
I just did a deep dive. I used my account in AI to do a deep dive to find out these isotope things and answer this question definitively. It says here, carbon dioxide from volcanic eruptions contains a mix of carbon isotopes, primarily carbon-12, carbon-13, and carbon-14. And there's more carbon-13 than there is the others. Carbon-14 is almost negligible on volcanic CO2. So, but again, doesn't matter which isotope of carbon is in the carbon dioxide molecule, it doesn't change how much it warms or not warms.
Yeah, I think we've kind of already answered this question from Mike O, who says, volcanoes, are we now saying that CO2 is all of a sudden a significant factor for climate? Well, carbon dioxide is a significant factor in, overall in regulating Earth's temperature. So it does have an effect. We're not saying that carbon dioxide is worthless in the atmosphere.
Well, look, I think the way to look at it is carbon dioxide is a greenhouse gas, no question about that, and it has very important effects at its lower concentrations. At the level where we are now, emissions, I don't know what effect it has.
But
It's certainly not measurable. At lower concentrations, yeah, I think it's important. At this concentration, no.
At lower, I want to clarify, at lower concentrations, it's important for its warming effect.
Yeah.
At higher concentrations, it's important, nevertheless, for its effect on plants, right?
Yeah.
You know, if you go too low, plants don't photosynthesize. As we go up, plants are doing better. That's why they pump CO2 into the greenhouses.
Yeah.
Linnea, if you put one more carbon dioxide question up here, I think Steve's going to lose it.
All right, I'll try to avoid them then. Okay, we have one quick question from Bob Johnson, which I think we can address very briefly, saying last night NOAA came out with their prediction. We also received word about the Hurricane Center stuff through email last night. Increased hurricanes this season. What say you? Don't have an opinion on that yet. We're going to probably have to have Steve and Joe on again. Or Stan and Joe on again. Sorry, Stan. In order to discuss the outlooks for the season. And Judith Curry also has her own hurricane prediction stuff. So maybe, you know, sometimes we do the Thunderdome with Joe and Stan. Maybe we'll have a 3-way Thunderdome with all three of them. That'd be kind of fun. I don't know, but we'll see.
We'd have to get Joe his own miter.
Yeah. All right. Sam Schick says, how many Republicans believe in climate action? Just wondering why they kept the $600 billion in the bill. A lot of them, unfortunately. Although, well, they'll pay lip service to it, I think. And I think it's part of the pathology of most Republicans, especially kind of GOP type Republicans, that, and I've mentioned this before, but they feel that if they pay lip service to this kind of thing, it makes them come off as moderate and reasonable. And, you know, regardless of whether it's true or not, they don't seem to really worry about that. I think it's peer pressure related too. So I don't know. Steve would probably have a better idea than I would.
Well, you know, the only one that ever really understood it was Jim Inhofe. And, you know, the rest of them, you know, Ted Cruz talks a good game. A lot of them talk a good game. Most of them don't. Even the ones that talk a good game will backslide. They still think emissions, you know, if we can cut emissions, boy, wouldn't that be terrific? Of course, as Jim Lakely intimated, I'm really not interested in emissions and how much they don't warm the planet. I think the whole thing is nonsense. But Republicans, you know, they don't spend as much time as we all do on this issue. So they really don't know much. And there's no incentive for them to know anything because they're just going to get beat up. And plus there's no money in not, you know, being for the climate hoax.
Yeah, let's be, I don't think we can know how many Republicans in their heart of hearts believe this stuff, but we do know that vis-a-vis the IRA spending on green energy, not a single Republican voted for that bill in the House or the Senate. And yet, after it passed, I believe 20 to 30 Republicans, as they were doing these negotiations, said we need to keep some of that. We need to keep that IRA spending. They sent a letter saying that. So that was their starting point for negotiation. And as I said, just today, I know of 4 senators said we're going to have to see some changes in the House bill on the IRA spending because we think they've cut too deeply. So whether they really believe it in their heart of hearts, I don't know, but they're willing to defend the spending on it.
Well, and also, you know, they confuse it with jobs. They think that, you know, the spending and these green jobs are really worthwhile jobs. Well, no, they're not productive jobs. I mean, green energy has no inherent value, intrinsic value. It's not adding to our wealth. Green energy has only made things more expensive one day, as it came close to in Spain, and as we experienced in Texas 3-4 years ago. There's going to be a catastrophic mass casualty event because of all this wind and solar that has crapped up our grids. So, but they keep thinking jobs, and we need jobs where people are creating value, manufacturing jobs, fossil fuel production jobs, construction jobs. Those are productive jobs. Wind, solar, that's nothing. That's not adding value, adding wealth to society.
The only green energy job growth should be, dismantling these boondoggle monstrosities of wind and solar across the country. So you can create jobs by canceling all this crap.
Well, here's the thing. They don't care about the wealth of the nation
Yeah.
or overall economy. They care about their districts. And if you build a solar factory in his district, then it's good for him, regardless of whether it's good for the nation.
Yeah.
And that's what they're thinking.
Yeah, but the thing is, I don't think there's any politician that has ever lost an election because they didn't build a wind farm or a solar farm. And if one of these guys in these swing districts was in trouble, you can bet Trump would do everything he could to help them. I just really don't understand it. I mean, America voted for Trump. You got to support the president's agenda. And if you're a Republican out there going, I'm not going to vote for the main part of your agenda, the tax cuts, because I need to have my wind farm, I just, I have no respect for that.
Yep, absolutely. Well, I'm going to read this comment from Chris Martz really quick regarding some of the stuff that we were talking about a bit earlier, but I thought his comments were enlightening, so we are going to bring them up. So this is from Chris. He says, what the people who claim when CO2 levels were last this high, sea levels were X meters higher, their argument is that there's a lag. But they also claim that once we reach net zero, warming stops immediately, which is completely counter to their previous argument. Yeah, that's exactly right, Chris. And I think if you were to probably corner someone like Gavin Schmidt or something on this type of issue, they would probably have to make a stand on one side or the other. But then as soon as you took your gaze off of them, they would use whatever argument was convenient again when talking to the media. I don't think that a lot of this stuff is founded in a very
science.
firm belief either way. Yeah, well, science, but yeah. Okay, this question from Kevin Gardner. How many acres of former farmland does it take to replace a nuke plant? Does anyone have that number on the top of their head there?
What does that mean in terms of like carbon sequestration? Is that what he's asking?
No, I think they're asking what's the footprint of a nuclear plant in terms of acreage.
It's the smallest of all the energy sources, I believe. The uranium mining is not great, and the main part of the plant, to the extent that it's got a footprint, the main part of it is just the security fences around it right now. It's the smallest.
There have been studies done that look at the whole construction from breaking earth on mining the materials all the way to the actual physical footprint of the power plant. And nuclear actually comes up as the second smallest, I believe. The absolute lowest land footprint from transmission lines to mining to everything is coal, actually, which is funny.
Energy density is very high.
Burn more coal.
But energy density is quite high. Yeah.
By the way, I want to compliment Kevin Gardner here on his icon. Bring that back up, will you, please? Yeah, he's got a Lincoln welder for an icon there. I've never seen that before. So I've used that particular welder a number of times. So yay for that.
Yeah, but what I think Kevin was getting at, and I think he explained it a little bit as we were answering that question, is like comparing the footprint, the physical footprint of a nuclear plant and how much energy it produces compared to, say, replacing that with all wind. What's the footprint of that? Or replacing it with all solar. What's the footprint of all of that? And it's enormous is what that is.
Yeah, enormous.
Yeah.
You can find those images on a Google search.
You can find them at Linnea's Energy at a Glance.
That's true.
Environmental impact.
I'll go look it up.
Environmental impact of solar.
Yes, if you go to energyataglance.com, there are pages on a whole bunch of different energy sources, breaking it down on their environmental impact and also their economic impact. So if you want to scroll through some of the data there, it's just kind of a broad overview of each of those things. So yes, thank you for the plug. That's very good. All right. Boy, we have a lot of questions about carbon dioxide today. So, here's another numbers question that I certainly do not know the answer to. From K1, who says, how many wind turbines are there in the U.S.? Too many.
Easy. Too many, right? Done.
I would say, scientifically speaking, a crap load.
Yeah.
It's like the old saying about that alcoholics have. One is too many, 1,000 is not enough.
I like this question from I Am Capo, who says, how much CO2 is created trying to capture CO2? And that's a fair question, actually.
That's a good question, because this week there was a report, Climeworks, which is this, I believe it's a Swiss company, maybe it's Swedish, but what the hell's the difference? Their carbon footprint was actually bigger than the amount of carbon they did direct air capture with. And they charge like $1,000 a ton for their direct air capture. I mean, it's total fraud. And and Climeworks gets the highest amount of the 45Q credit. I think it's like $80 a ton.
Yeah, unless you're doing utilization minus the storage part, carbon capture is just like make work. It's just digging holes and filling it in again.
Yeah, there you go.
Let's see. Kevin also asks, isn't the sulfur dioxide emitted by volcanoes a cooling factor?
Yes, when it gets up into the stratosphere very high and dissipates, it acts as it dissipates and reflects light coming in from the sun. And so it does have a net cooling effect. That's what happened in 1992 with Mount Pinatubo, which erupted in the Philippines and destroyed the Subic Bay Air Force Base there and a bunch of other things. It injected sulfur dioxide particles and also ash very, very high into the atmosphere. And it circled the globe for almost 2 years before it finally dissipated. And you can actually see the effect of global temperature dropping due to that eruption.
And we don't have a whole lot of time left here because I think our producer has to get going. But this question from Rick is one that I was dealing with very recently, which is, why doesn't NOAA report that raising temperatures have more to do with higher lows than daytime high temperatures? That is the question. I've been poring over those state climate summaries from NOAA for weeks now, working on our own state climate summaries. And every single one of them talks about how extreme warming is going to make everything worse. And then they proceed to show the data. And it's always that the extreme cold is less frequent. And oftentimes there are even states like Minnesota, actually, I believe, where extreme heat has been declining for the last 100 years. So it's, it's very, very silly, guys.
Well, I think it's because they don't talk about it because they're always focusing on the average. You know, the average has become actually from day one. You know, when Hansen first went in front of Congress in June 1988, it was all about the average temperature. And so that's how it's always been done. And we're not going to change it now. But when you go look at the high temperatures versus the low temperatures overnight all around, they go up significantly. The high temperatures, they kind of bumble along, pretty much the same over the last 100 years, except for places like dates like 1933, 34, and 36. But, we had some extreme weather events then that caused tremendously high temperatures in the United States and other places. But yeah, they just don't like to talk about it because that's how it was always done. And if they only talked about, the high temperatures or the low temperatures separately, they couldn't muster as much alarm, I don't think, because people would look at it like, well, gee, it's not as cold at night that it used to be. Gosh, that's a benefit.
Yeah, when I worked in Montana, and my mentor there, he'd go to the city council meetings, and they'd open with a prayer thanking the Lord for global warming because it was helping extreme nighttime lows to be reduced. Look, when they mention the nighttime warming, to the extent that they do it at all, they never mention that it means less deaths from temperatures. And what they do is they try to paint it as an awful thing. Oh my God, our kid, the New York Times called it the end of snow. Someone in England was interviewed, and he said, our kids will not know what snow looked like. Why? Oh, well, the warming at night. I'm sorry. If you go from 20 below zero to a big jump of 14 below zero, 6 degrees, if it snows, it snows. If you get ice, it gets ice. It doesn't change that whatsoever.
Yeah, that's a super good point, Sterling. That's the amazing thing with a lot of this is they act like a very, very small incremental change in temperature is going to something that a lot of devices can't even measure, is going to, end one ecological process or another. It's pretty outstanding. Anyway, I think that's all we have for now.
Yeah, I just wanted to bring up. I wanted to bring up on screen two things from an earlier question. This is a chart here on land use of wind and solar in coal. Let me take the comments off of there real quick. Yeah, land use of wind, solar, and coal electricity generation. You can see. Oops, lost it. There we go. Yep. So acres per megawatt of energy, 70 acres per megawatt, and coal is just a little over 10. And then a second one, this is about solar, which again was what I think Kevin was asking about. And 43.5 acres is required to per megawatt in solar, and nuclear is only 12.7. So that's a great example. You can find all that stuff at Energy at a Glance, which is energyataglance.com, which Linnea has worked on. And you get the facts about that sort of stuff. So
yeah, and remember these particular charts are taking the entire lifespan of the lifespan of acreage. It's not just a coal plant per megawatt is 12 acres. It's that the mining, the transmission lines, all of that is included in all of these.
So and does this chart include like the fact that solar works maybe 4 hours out of the day? Is that?
I think they might have actually been rather generous with solar on this one in that situation. It's just per installed megawatt. It's not megawatt hour.
Okay. Oh, there you go. All right. Well, that was a good way to end the show. Thank you so much, Steve Milloy from junkscience.com for being our guest today. Thank you very much, Linnea Lueken, Anthony Watts, and H. Sterling Burnett, all of the Heartland Institute. Be sure to always be visiting climaterealism.com. That's where you get the counterspin to the alarmist coverage in our mainstream legacy corporate media. Visit climateataglance.com, where you can get fantastic information. In fact, we're updating our entries at Climate at a Glance as we speak. That's so you can arm yourself with facts to fight against alarmists that happen to come across in your life. Always go to whatsupwiththat.com, one of the best climate websites in the world, junkscience.com, which is a fantastic website by Steve Milloy here. And if you go to heartland.org, you can subscribe to our Climate Change Weekly newsletter written by one Sterling Burnett, the Archbishop of Ranterbury. And I want to thank all of you for watching, especially you in the chat, who are always make this show so much more fun, and especially with your questions. That is all we got for today, and we will see you again next week. Bye-bye.
How dare you!